My name is Angela Bradbury. I'm a physician scientist in the Department of Medicine and the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy. I am also the executive director and founder of the Penn Telegenetics program, a program centered on providing genetic services in local healthcare settings or in the home so that patients across the U.S. can have access to genetic services. Today, I will talk about APOE testing, a type of genetic testing that has become important for patients with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. APOE testing has become important for patients who have mild cognitive impairment with the advent of two drugs, lecanemab and donanemab, which we have found can slow cognitive decline in patients with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. As part of evaluation for these therapies, patients are recommended to get APOE testing. While genetic testing has been increasingly incorporated into clinical care, a lot of patients ask, what is genetic testing? Why do I need to do this? How much will it cost? And why is it important for my medical care? Our DNA contains instructions for over 20,000 genes, and these genes give instructions for the development of proteins that allow our cells and bodies to function. APOE is one such gene, and it comes in three different forms. These include E2, E3, and E4. Each individual inherits one of these forms from each of their parents, so every individual has a combination of two of these forms. For example, a person could be E2, E2, they could be E3, E3, they could be E4, E4. Or their APOE gene could be a combination. They could have an E2 and an E3 variant, or a combination like an E3 and an E4 variant. There are 6 possible combinations, and these are important because they are associated with an increased risk for Alzheimer's disease and also an increased risk for side effects with the 2 drugs that we mentioned earlier, lecanemab and donanemab. So one reason APOE testing is recommended for patients who are considering treatment with lecanemab or donanemab is that individuals who carry an E4 type have an increased risk for something called ARIA. ARIA stands for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities and are changes that one can see on an MRI of the brain. These ARIA changes may be associated with small bleeding or swelling in the brain. While ARIA is often asymptomatic, ARIA changes can be associated with symptoms such as headache, vision changes, confusion, or gait disturbances. Individuals with 1 or 2 copies of the E4 APOE type have an increased risk for ARIA with treatment with donanemab or lecanemab. For this reason, patients are recommended to undergo APOE testing before initiating treatment. Beyond these treatment considerations, a person's APOE genotype also indicates whether they may be at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. Individuals who carry at least 1 copy of the E4 variant have an increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. For example, if a person carries 2 copies of the E4 variant, they could have a lifetime risk of Alzheimer's disease up to 55%. But I also want to point out that that means that half of people who have 2 versions of E4 do not develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's a risk and it's not a certainty. Individuals who have an E3 variant have a neutral risk. There's no increased risk with the E3 variant, and there's even some evidence that patients who have, or individuals who have an E2 variant might have a lower risk for Alzheimer's disease. These figures are estimates, and we may find over time with more research that we have better estimates for what a person's risk is with these different APOE genotypes. It's also important to realize that there are other risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, So someone's genotype is not the only consideration or the only contributor. Many patients without E4 alleles develop Alzheimer's disease, so other risk factors such as diabetes, hypertension, or cardiovascular disease may be contributing. Family history is also another contributor to an increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. Importantly, a person's APOE genotype also has implications for their family members. For example, a person who has 2 copies of E4 will pass an E4 variant to each of their children. If they have 1 copy of E4, the other copy being an E2 or an E3, they have a 50% chance of passing an E4 copy to each of their children. There are also implications for siblings. If an individual has an E4 variant, their siblings may also have an E4 variant, and this could mean that their siblings could be at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease as well. So APOE testing is currently only recommended for patients who are considering treatment with lecanemab or donanemab because they have a mild cognitive impairment. It is not recommended for individuals who do not have any memory problems or relatives who have a family member with an APOE4 variant. If family members are interested in learning more about their own APOE status, we do recommend that they meet with a genetic counselor to really think through clearly whether they are interested in this information and the benefits and risks and limitations of proceeding with APOE testing.